Poor girl lost her skirt on a stranger's bike. She had no idea he was the billionaire CEO. Hey, that's my cab. I don't know what I expected that morning, but it definitely wasn't a 6-foot man in a charcoal suit slamming a yellow taxi door in my face. My sketchbook slipped under my arm. My heel cracked. Rain soaked straight through my only blouse. And he just looked at me like I was background noise. Next time, he said, not even turning around, wear running shoes. I wanted to scream. I did scream. But the cab was already gone. The next time I saw him, he was standing at the podium, being introduced as my company's new billionaire CEO, the CEO who stole my taxi, and then my heart. I was 28, broke, and holding my life together with duct tape and deadlines. Every morning started the same: burnt toast, unpaid bills, and praying my heels wouldn't snap on the subway stairs. But that morning, it broke differently. It wasn't just the rain, or the fact that I had a freelance pitch that might, just maybe, get me out of this month's rent disaster. It was the man. The stranger. The one who slammed the taxi door in my face like I didn't exist. The one who didn't even look back when my heel cracked and I went down on one knee in a puddle, holding a sketchbook soaked in ink and shame. I stood up, slow, dripping, humiliated, his words still echoing. Next time, wear running shoes. I wanted to chase after the cab, not for a ride, just to tell him what he'd cost me. But instead, I wiped the rain off my face and whispered, "I hope your meeting gets canceled and your tie shrinks." It took me 25 minutes to reach the building. Monroe Industries. Glass doors, chrome lettering. The kind of place that doesn't just smell like money, it breathes it. I wasn't even an employee, just a contractor clinging to the hope they'd keep me for the charity campaign I had submitted concept sketches for last week. I was supposed to meet the creative director at 9 sharp. I arrived at 9:17, drenched, limping, then trying to stop my bag from dripping on the pristine marble floor. "Name?" the receptionist asked with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Sophie Lane," I muttered, "for creative." She tapped her screen. "Room 27B, top floor, they're already reviewing pitches." Perfect. Ruined sketchbook, wet blouse, and I was walking into a room full of people paid more in a week than I'd made all year. I pressed the elevator button with a sigh and whispered to myself, "Just fake it. You've been doing that since you were 12. The doors opened. Everyone was already seated. And there he was. Not just seated, standing, in front of the giant digital screen, adjusting his cufflinks like he owned the world. Because apparently, he did. The man from the taxi. The one who didn't turn around. The one who ripped my morning apart like it was paper. "Let me introduce our new CEO," said the moderator, with way too much excitement. "Caleb Monroe." My heart dropped so hard it had to echo. He looked right at me. A flicker of surprise, recognition, a flicker of something else. I didn't move, couldn't. He tilted his head, subtle, like he was trying not to smirk. "We'll also be reviewing design submissions for the new Give Hope campaign," he said, stepping to the side. "I hear we've got some fresh talent in the room." My knees wobbled. Because my sketchbook? It wasn't fresh anymore. It was soaked, torn, and in it, the story of a boy who grew up alone in a tower made of glass. I hadn't just drawn for a job. I'd drawn because I needed someone to see it. To see me. And now, the only person who'd seen me that morning saw me again. Not as the soaked girl with the broken heel, but as the woman whose art might be hanging on the wall behind him in less than 10 minutes. "Would Miss Sophie Lane come forward?" the creative director called. My name rang like a dare. I stepped forward, one foot in front of the other, and as I passed Caleb Monroe, he whispered without looking, "Told you you needed better shoes." Whether to scream or collapse, all I knew was this man was going to ruin me, or change everything. Chapter 1: The Curb Where It Started. I was already late when the wind blew up my skirt and I nearly stepped into a puddle the size of a small country. My heel wobbled, my arms flailed, and I whispered a prayer to gravity. I had exactly $7 in my checking account, and that day was the one chance I had left to prove to Monroe Industries that I could be more than just a freelance. Then came the cab. My cab. I raised my hand, eyes hopeful, heart racing. And then he took it. A man in a suit so sharp it looked like he could cut diamonds. He stepped into the taxi like he'd been born inside of it, slammed the door, and didn't even glance in my direction. "Hey!" I shouted, running toward it, one heel snapping with a pitiful crack. "That was mine!" He didn't hear me. He ignored me. The cab pulled off, splashing a shallow wave of dirty city water across my ankles, and just before the tires disappeared around the corner, I saw his face. Briefly. Calm. Polished. Like the world owed him nothing, and yet he owned it anyway. I stood there, drenched, defeated, and gripping my sketchbook so hard the corner bent. And maybe it was just the exhaustion or the fact that I hadn't slept more than 3 hours the night before, but my eyes burned, my throat tightened. I whispered under my breath, "I hope your meeting gets canceled and your tie shrinks." By the time I reached the office building, the receptionist barely glanced up. "Name," she said. "Sophie Lane," I muttered, pushing wet hair behind my ear. "I'm here to present for the Give Hope campaign." She pointed toward the elevator. "Top floor." "You're late." I nodded, stepping in with 3 other people in power suits who didn't smell like wet concrete. I checked the time. 9:17. My pitch was at 9. Perfect. My reflection in the elevator mirrored doors mocked me. Wet blazer, ruined mascara, and a sketchbook that now looked more like a modern art disaster than a portfolio. Still, I wasn't giving up. Not when I was this close. When the doors opened, I didn't breathe. Everyone was already seated, quiet, focused. And then I saw him, at the front of the room, standing behind a podium. My jaw dropped before my mind caught up. It was him, taxi thief, rain smug, designer suit destroyer of mornings. The man who stole my ride was the new CEO. I froze. Not dramatically, not in some movie way, just internally. Like all the air had been vacuumed out of my lungs. He looked up. His gaze found mine like a radar locking onto a target. And then he smiled, like he was in on some private joke that only he found funny. I blinked. No way. No actual way. Someone said my name, loudly. "Sophie Lane," the woman in the front said. "You're next." I swallowed. I stepped forward. And as I passed him, his voice low, casual, unforgivable, he said, "Told you, should have worn running shoes." I turned to glare at him, but I said nothing. I laid my sketchbook on the table, opening it slowly. Most of the colors had run. The charcoal was smudged. Water had bled the paper into waves. My best work looked like a second-grade watercolor accident. Still, I spoke. Quietly, but with everything I had left. "These are the pieces I submitted for the Give Hope campaign. I apologize for the state. There was an unexpected encounter with a puddle and a cab." The room was silent, except for a small laugh, his laugh. I didn't look at him. I kept going. Page by page, I told them about the campaign, about how hope isn't loud, it's quiet, like a sketch without color, or a day that begins with rain but still ends with light. About how the faces in these drawings, some mine, some imagined, were all the people I thought might need someone to believe in them. And when I finished, the room stayed quiet, but not cold. They were listening, even him. When I stepped away from the table, I felt his eyes on me again, not mocking this time, curious, almost impressed. Almost. Later that day, when I got back to my desk, still soggy, still furious, I opened my email. There was a message waiting. From Caleb Monroe. Subject: Let's build something. Sophie, you're hired. Salary flexible, starting now. Sketchbook, tragic but bold. Let's build something that can't be washed away. I stared at the screen, and then I said it out loud. You have got to be kidding me. Because the man who stole my cab was now offering me a seat beside him. And God help me, I wasn't sure whether I wanted to slap him or say yes. Chapter 2. Wrong elevator, right disaster. The elevator doors were just about to close when a hand reached in and stopped them. And of course, it was him. I could recognize that smirk even through 5 layers of awkward silence and one mildly traumatic puddle memory. Caleb Monroe stepped in like he owned the building, which, in fairness, he probably did. He didn't look at me immediately, just pressed the button to the top floor and adjusted his cufflinks like the silence was a comfortable suit he wore on purpose. I stood in the corner trying to become invisible. Hair still damp, skirt still wrinkled from the earlier sprint, and my dignity folded somewhere inside the soaked sketchbook under my arm. Then, finally, he turned. "You always ride elevators in silence?" he asked. "Or is this just a me thing?" I stared straight ahead. "I usually prefer not to share them with criminals." His brow lifted. "Criminal? You stole my cab," I said flatly. He laughed, like a real laugh, like it genuinely entertained him. "It's New York. If you don't steal the cab, someone else does." "Yeah," I muttered, "usually someone who's already late to their own billion-dollar meeting." He tilted his head. "Late is relative. You made it. Barely." And I got a soaking wet presentation that still beat every other submission today. I blinked. "You read it?" "I listened," he said. "There's a difference." I hated how calm he sounded. How sure of himself, like everything came easy. "You didn't even say anything in the meeting." "I never speak during first rounds," he said with a shrug. "I observe." "Right. Observe, like a judgmental statue in a $1,000 coat." The elevator dinged, and then as the doors opened and he stepped out, he glanced back and said, "Nice save, by the way, with the skirt. You hold yourself like someone who's used to being underestimated." I froze. And just like that, he was gone again. 3 days later, I found myself standing in front of a door with his name on it. Caleb Monroe, CEO. HR had told me to check in for orientation. They said he'd requested to do it personally. I knocked. "Come in," came the voice. I stepped in slowly. His office looked like a tech startup met a minimalist dream. Clean, glass everything, a wall of windows behind him that framed the Manhattan skyline like a painting. And there he was, seated behind a walnut desk, sipping coffee like this was just another Tuesday. "You came," he said, not looking up. HR said, "Too." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit." He didn't. "I didn't say please," he added with a grin. "Sorry. Please sit." I sat down slowly, back straight, arms crossed tight. "You look tense," he noted. "You invited the girl whose skirt you tore and whose cab you stole to your office, and you're surprised she's not relaxed?" He smiled. "You're not just tense. You're stubborn." "No," I said. "I'm surviving. There's a difference." He leaned forward. "I like that." "Good," I shot back. "I wasn't trying to impress you." "You succeeded anyway." I stared at him. "Why did you hire me?" He didn't answer right away, just reached for a folder on his desk and pushed it toward me. Inside were my water-damaged sketches, scanned, printed, and organized into a presentation packet. At the bottom of the pile was a post-it note that read, "Art sees what polish misses." My throat tightened. "Most people present with polish," he said. "You presented with pain, and people remember pain more than polish." That shut me up for a full 5 seconds. Then I said, "You're very poetic for a corporate overlord." "I took a poetry class once," he said. "Got a C." I rolled my eyes. He tapped the folder. "This is good, and I want more of it. From you. I don't usually work with guys who mock me in elevators." He nodded. "Then let me make this simple." He stood, walked around the desk, sat on the edge of it in front of me. "I think you're good, better than you think you are. I also think I was a jerk. But I don't like pretending to care. I either do or I don't." "And you care?" I asked cautiously. "I care about good ideas, about risk, and I care about people who survive without being saved." The room went quiet. For the first time, I saw something different in him. Not arrogance, not charm, just tiredness. Like someone who knew how heavy it was to pretend nothing ever hurt. "I don't need a savior," I whispered. Good, he said. I'm terrible at it. That afternoon, I was back at my desk when an internal message popped up on my screen. From Caleb Monroe. Subject, coffee and strategy. Let's talk about the next project, and maybe, just maybe, I'll let you pick the coffee spot this time. P.S. I still owe you an umbrella. I didn't respond, but I smiled. A real one. Maybe it was a mistake to say yes to a man like him, but something told me this was going to be the most interesting disaster of my life. Chapter 3. The coffee he didn't deserve. I told myself it was just coffee. Not a date. Not a moment. Just caffeine and uncomfortable silence in a cup. Still, I changed shirts 3 times before leaving the apartment. Not because I cared, but because I didn't want to look like I cared. There's a difference. He picked a place 2 blocks from the office. Quiet. Too quiet. The kind of place where the pastries have names you can't pronounce and the coffee costs more than my electricity bill. He was already there, naturally, sitting by the window, scrolling through his phone, looking like the cover of Forbes had come to life. When I walked in, he stood up, like a gentleman. Or an actor pretending to be one. You came, he said, flashing that calm, camera-ready smile. You invited me, I said. I assumed it was mandatory. He tilted his head, studying me like I was a riddle he hadn't quite solved yet. I don't do mandatory. If I wanted obedience, I'd hire robots. Well, I said, pulling out a chair, your assistant already kind of talks like one. He laughed, and that was the problem. Because every time he laughed, I forgot I hated him a little. You're drinking tea? He asked after I ordered. I don't want to owe you coffee. That's fair. We sat in silence for a moment. Then he said, I read your blog. I blinked. What? You post your sketches, your essays, your stories. I spent 2 hours reading them last night. I felt exposed, like he had found my secret drawer of broken thoughts and read every single one. You stalked me? I researched you. Oh, so it's professional stalking. He ignored the sarcasm. There's a line you wrote, he continued. Some people don't need rescuing. They just need someone to sit beside them in the dark, without trying to fix the light. My throat caught. You remember that? I wrote it down, he said. It hit me. Why? I asked. You don't seem like the type who sits in the dark. He leaned back, something flickering in his eyes, something I hadn't seen before. I used to, he said quietly. Before the money, before the suits, before the job that never ends. For the first time, I saw it, the wound, the reason behind the perfect mask, and I hated how much I understood. After the coffee, we walked, not on purpose, just in the same direction. The air between us had shifted, lighter, not easy, but less sharp. Then he asked, why do you draw? I shrugged, to survive. He stopped walking, not to succeed? No, I said, that's your thing. He laughed, then got quiet. You know, it's strange. You're the first person in years who talks to me like I'm not made of gold. I didn't mean to say it, but it came out anyway. That's because I know how heavy gold is. He didn't say anything, just looked at me, and I swear, for a second, he wanted to kiss me. But he didn't. He said, "You're something else, Sophie Lane." I looked away. You still owe me an umbrella. The next day at work, he was different. Not flirty, not cold, just present. He asked questions during meetings, laughed less, listened more. When I walked past his office, he looked up, and for the first time, I didn't look away. There was something terrifying about a man like him noticing someone like me. Not because he was powerful, but because he was dangerous. Not in the way of fists or fury, but in the way someone can see through you and not flinch. I started calling it the coffee he didn't deserve in my head, because he didn't earn that part of me, the one that started to soften. But I gave it anyway. And that scared me more than anything. Chapter 4. The email he wasn't supposed to read. It was meant to be a draft, a way to vent without consequence, like writing a letter you never intend to send, only this one ended up sent. I'd written it the night before, curled up on the couch in my too small apartment, my laptop balancing on a pillow, my heart balancing on a thread. It was never supposed to leave the safety of drafts. Subject line, things I'd say if I wasn't afraid. It started innocent enough, about work, but then the walls came down. You walk around like you don't notice anyone, Caleb. But you notice me. I know you do. And the worst part? I started noticing you too. I hate that I do. Somewhere between exhaustion and anger and whatever emotion I didn't want to name, I must have hit send. This to him. Caleb Monroe. The realization didn't hit until I saw the notification blinking on my work computer. Things I'd say if I wasn't afraid. My stomach flipped. I clicked it open with trembling fingers. It was blank. No reply, no words. Just one thing attached. A calendar invite. Lunch, 1 p.m., conference room D. No subject, no explanation. I sat, frozen. Every cell in my body screamed to disappear. 1 p.m. came faster than I wanted. I walked the hallway like a condemned soul, every step echoing louder than the last. My palms were damp, my mouth dry, my head, a tornado of humiliation. When I opened the door, he was already there. Standing at the window, arms crossed, back turned. He didn't move when I entered. Didn't say anything. Just silence. Dead silence. I closed the door behind me and stood still. Didn't mean to send it, I finally whispered. I know. Still no eye contact. It was a mistake. I was tired. I didn't even know it got sent. He nodded slowly, then finally turned. And the look on his face wasn't anger. It was something worse. It was knowing. You're allowed to hate me, Sophie, he said quietly. But I never wanted to be the reason you hate yourself for feeling something. That cracked something in me, because it wasn't just about the email anymore. It was about everything. You scare me, I admitted, not because you're powerful or rich or always right, but because you see things in me I don't want anyone to see. His eyes softened. That's not a bad thing. It is, I said, stepping back, because if you see it, you could break it. And I've worked too hard to put myself back together. He took a step forward. What if I don't want to break it? I looked away. You already did. The room went quiet again. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out something folded. A piece of paper. I wrote something too, he said. Not an email, old-fashioned style. He handed it to me and walked out. No dramatic exit, no final word. I waited until the door clicked shut before unfolding it. His handwriting was neat, like he wrote for clarity, not flair. Sophie, you weren't supposed to send it. I wasn't supposed to read it. But I'm glad you did. Because for once, I wasn't the only one terrified of feeling something real. And I'd rather feel terrified with you than safe with anyone else. I folded the paper slowly, tucked it into the back of my notebook, and pressed it closed like a secret. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of the embarrassment, but because of the truth inside it. The next few days at work were strange. He didn't avoid me, but he didn't confront me either. We danced around each other like two people, pretending the song wasn't still playing. I made coffee like nothing happened. He complimented a design I submitted without looking directly at me. But it wasn't cold. It was careful. Like we were both afraid to drop something fragile. Claire noticed. Why do you look like someone's reading your diary out loud in meetings? Because he is. She blinked. Wait. He read something? What did you do? Something stupid. Claire raised an eyebrow. You like him? No, I snapped too quickly. Yes. I don't know. She smiled. That's the beginning of a really good disaster. The turning point came unexpectedly. I was late to a morning strategy meeting. Storm, no cabs, one heel broke on the way, classic Sophie chaos. I walked in flustered, damp, and a little breathless. Everyone turned. Except Caleb. He was leaning over the table explaining a model. When he noticed me, he paused. His eyes met mine, and he smiled. Not this smug one. Not the one he gave to investors. A soft one. Just for me. Like a momentary truce. He pulled out the chair beside him. I sat, We said nothing. But for the rest of the meeting, his fingers brushed mine every time he passed me a paper. On purpose. And I didn't pull away. That afternoon, he messaged me from Caleb Monroe. Subject: a better email. Dinner. No pressure, no labels, just two people who sent the wrong message to the right person. I didn't respond immediately, but I did show up. And when I sat across from him at that quiet Italian place, 3 blocks from the office, I finally said it out loud. I don't trust easily. He nodded. I don't either. So what are we doing? He took a sip of wine and said, learning. About what? He smiled. Whether love is still possible for people who stopped believing in it. Chapter 5. The dinner where nothing was said. The waiter lit a candle between us. Not for romance, but to keep the chill of the evening from creeping into the space between two people trying not to break what hadn't begun. Caleb was already seated when I arrived. Gray button-up, sleeves rolled, hair slightly undone like he tried to look effortless, but not like he cared too much. I cared too much. That was the problem. I wore black. Simple. Intentional. A color that looked like armor, but also like surrender, depending on how you wore it. He stood as I approached, that old-school kind of respect. Still surprises me. Sophie, he said like a question, like he wasn't sure I'd really show. Is Caleb, I replied with a nod, pretending not to feel like the ground had shifted beneath my feet. We sat. We didn't talk for the first few minutes. Water was poured. Menus opened, closed. He watched me with that soft kind of curiosity that wasn't about attraction. It was about understanding. He was learning me, or trying to. The bread basket came. He offered it silently. I took a piece, broke it in half, and let the crumbs fall like ash on my napkin. He noticed. You always do that? He asked softly. Do what? Break the bread before you eat it. Force of habit comes from never trusting what's whole. He leaned back, absorbing that. I used to do the same thing with relationships, he said. Pick them apart before they could fall apart on their own. The candle flickered, and suddenly the table between us felt more like a confessional booth than a dining table. The waiter came. I ordered pasta I couldn't pronounce. He ordered the same. Safe choices. Predictable. But what came next wasn't. He looked at me, not in that powerful, charming CEO way, but like a man who wanted to say something real. You scare me. I blinked. That's original. He didn't smile. I mean it. You don't want anything from me. Should I? No, he said. That's what makes this different. I looked away, because looking at him felt too much like falling, and falling wasn't safe. Dinner came. We ate in small bites, between long silences, between questions we didn't ask. But the air between us was full of things unsaid, full of fears neither of us could name. He told me a story about college. I laughed. I told him about my first failed art exhibit. He listened. Somewhere between the appetizer and the main course, something shifted. I stopped waiting for him to disappoint me, and he stopped pretending he had nothing left to prove. After the plates were cleared, we stayed, long after the couple next to us had left. Long after the waiter stopped refilling our glasses. It was Caleb who finally broke the silence. I wanted to kiss you the night of the email. I swallowed. I know. Why didn't I? Because I would have pulled away. He nodded slowly. And now? I'm still deciding. He looked down. Oh, wait. The words landed heavy, like a promise but with no pressure. And that, more than any grand gesture, undid me a little. We walked outside. The air was cold. No coat, no umbrella, just goosebumps and electricity. He walked me to the corner. Didn't ask to come up. Didn't linger. Just stood there in silence. Well, again. But this time, the silence said everything. He took a step closer. Not enough to touch me, but enough that I could feel him. Good night, Sophie. Good night, Caleb. I turned, and for the first time in a long time, I wished someone would stop me. But he didn't, because he meant it when he said he'd wait. and I didn't know whether to thank him or cry. Chapter 6. The blazer he let her borrow. It started with the air conditioner. Too cold, too loud, and completely out of my control. Like most things in that building, I had forgotten my cardigan. Again. And the office felt like it had been designed for penguins in suits. I sat at my desk rubbing my arms, pretending not to shiver. Pretending everything was fine. But Caleb saw. Of course he saw. He didn't say anything at first. He just disappeared into his glass office for a moment, then reappeared, and held out his blazer. Dark gray, clean lines, still warm from his body. "Here," he said softly. "Take it." He hesitated. Because it wasn't just a jacket, it was an invitation. An unspoken line drawn between them and us. And maybe also between before and after. I took it. Only because I was freezing. Only because I needed it. Only because my fingers were turning blue, and not because it smelled like cedar and expensive coffee and something else I couldn't place. I draped it over my shoulders and said nothing. But it swallowed me. Too big, too masculine, too him. Claire walked by my desk and raised both eyebrows so high they almost disappeared into her hairline. In the back of the office, the voice she hated most, she whispered, grinning. "Drop it." Too late, the gossip train has left the station. Later that day, I caught Caleb looking at me from the corner of the boardroom. The meeting was about numbers, projections, strategy. But his eyes weren't on the charts. They were on me. Still wearing his blazer. Still pretending not to notice. I didn't smile. But I didn't take it off either. At lunch, we didn't eat together. We didn't speak. But when I stood too fast for my desk and the blazer slipped off one shoulder, I saw him look up like a reflex. Like maybe part of him was afraid I'd leave it behind. And maybe part of me was afraid of that too. By afternoon, the office buzzed with a different kind of energy. You know that shift, when people sense something unspoken happening in the room, and suddenly everything feels warmer? Even in the cold? That was us. Invisible, but noticed. We exchanged a total of 3 sentences that day. "Can you approve the second version of the report? I'll look at it tonight. Thank you for the blazer." His reply? A slight nod. And then, "It suits you." By 6 p.m., most people had left. I stayed behind, finishing up notes for a proposal. Caleb was still in his office, lights dimmed, leaning back in his chair like the weight of the company was pressing into his shoulders. I stood, the blazer still on me, still wrapped around my uncertainty. I took a step toward his office. Paused. Took another. Then knocked. Softly. He looked up, surprised, but not startled. "Leaving?" he asked. I nodded. "Thought I should return this?" I began to slide the blazer off my shoulders. "Keep it." I blinked. "What?" "It looks better on you anyway." I stared at him. "You say things like that too easily." He smiled, the kind that hides 1,000 regrets. "No, I just mean them." We stood there for a moment. Just 2 people in a half-lit office, surrounded by half-written stories and deadlines. Then I spoke. "Do you ever want to undo something?" He leaned forward. "What do you mean?" "I don't know. Rewind, say something different. Or maybe say nothing at all." He nodded. "All the time. And do you ever think maybe we're in something we shouldn't be?" He met my eyes. "Only when I try to stop feeling it." I left the office that night wearing his blazer. Not because I forgot to give it back, but because I wasn't ready to let it go. I walked home with it wrapped tight around me like armor stitched from borrowed hope. And somewhere deep down, I knew. It wasn't just about warmth anymore. It was about presence. Chapter 7. The apology that wasn't about the coffee. The apology came on a Wednesday. Not because that day mattered, but because Wednesdays were always too long, too slow, and too in between to expect anything good. I hadn't slept much. I hadn't eaten either. My inbox was overflowing. Claire was out sick, and someone from HR had accidentally deleted the team's quarterly projections. I was gripping my mug so tightly it felt like it might become part of my hand. That's when he walked in, holding a small cardboard tray with 2 cups. No assistant, no meeting behind it. Just him, and 2 coffees. He placed one on my desk without speaking. I blinked up at him. What's this? He didn't smile this time. He just said quietly, an apology. I stared at the cup. Plain white. No name on the side. I didn't touch it. Caleb, I said, slow and careful. You didn't mess up my coffee. No, he replied, but I messed up something. He stood there for a second, then sat in the chair across from me. I'm uninvited, but not unwelcome. You told me you didn't want to be another story, he said. And you said you weren't writing one, I answered, watching him closely. I lied. There it was. The thing we'd both known but hadn't said. The thing that sat between us in meetings, in emails, in the space between silence and breath. You're not supposed to admit that, I said. I know. Especially not to me. I know. I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed, my voice lower, more raw. What do you think this is, Caleb? I don't know, he whispered. Because it's not just coffee. I know. You know everything, don't you? He didn't answer that. Because we both knew he didn't. There was a long pause. The kind of pause that happens when two people are trying not to fall. He finally spoke. Last week, when you wore the blazer, I told myself it didn't mean anything. And now I realize it meant everything. I didn't move, didn't breathe, because if I did, the mask might fall, and he'd see all the things I had tried so hard to hide. Like how I'd folded that blazer and placed it in the back of my closet like a relic. Like how I'd worn it again the next day, alone in my apartment. Like how I wanted him to keep showing up, but was too proud to ask. Why now? I asked finally. Why today? Because silence is starting to sound like goodbye. The words landed like glass between us. Sharp, fragile, honest. I looked at the cup. He lifted it, sipped. Too sweet. Just how I like it. I hated that he remembered. Loved it more. You're the boss, I said. He nodded. And I'm not. He finished for me. Not just an assistant. I blinked. Because somehow that hurt more than it healed. He wasn't wrong. I wasn't just an assistant. But what was I now? A line he kept crossing? A maybe? An almost? Caleb, I said softly, this, whatever this is, scares me. I know. You keep saying that, because it's the only thing I'm sure of. That I don't want to lose this before it begins. He leaned forward now, elbows on his knees, eyes locked on mine. I'm not here for convenience, he said. I'm not here to confuse you. I looked away. But you do, I whispered. I know. The next day, things didn't magically fix themselves. We still didn't sit together at lunch. He still didn't text. I still didn't reply to his calendar invites with anything more than confirmed. But the air felt different, less cold, less brittle. And then Friday came, and everything cracked open again. I walked into the elevator like usual, except this time, he was already inside. We stood side by side. 4 floors. No words. Just breath and tension. Then the lights flickered. Elevator jolted. He stopped. Of course we'd get stuck. Seriously, I groaned. Maybe the building's trying to play matchmaker, he said dryly. I shot him a look. Not funny. A little funny. I sat on the floor, hugged my knees. Caleb stayed standing for a minute, then slowly slid down next to me. Silence again, but a familiar kind. Not heavy. It's just there. I used to love elevators, I said randomly. They felt safe, contained, like the world couldn't get in. And now they just remind me how fast things can stop. He looked at me. Not through me. Not past me. At me. Are you mad at me? I shook my head. Not mad. Disappointed? Maybe. He nodded, accepting it like someone who had lived with guilt before. And maybe he had. You said it wasn't about coffee, I murmured. He smiled faintly. It never is. Then what is it about? He thought for a long time, then said quietly. It's about how I look at you in meetings and wonder what you're thinking. It's about how you don't laugh at my jokes unless they're actually funny. It's about the way you type like you're mad at the keyboard, and how you always carry that red pen even when you don't need it. I blinked. It was too much, but not enough. He kept going. It's about how you make me feel like I'm not just a CEO, that I'm a person. And I forgot what that felt like. I leaned my head back against the wall of the elevator, closed my eyes. The silence stretched, but it wasn't awkward. It was a shelter. Then, softly, I said, "The day you gave me that blazer, I almost cried in the bathroom." Why? Because it felt like the first time someone saw me without asking me to be anything more. He didn't respond. He just let that sit. And I was grateful for it. The elevator jerked again, buzzed back to life. The floor number lit up. As the doors opened, I stood first. He didn't move. He just looked at me with that same unspoken question, but I didn't have an answer yet. So I just said, "Thanks for the coffee," and walked out, leaving behind the apology that wasn't really about caffeine, but about everything else we still didn't know how to say. Chapter 8. The lunch she almost skipped. It was raining again. Not dramatically, just enough to feel like the world wanted you to stay home. I sat at my desk, watching droplets race each other down the window. There was a company lunch scheduled, some leadership initiative Caleb had signed off on. A bland Italian restaurant. Assigned seating. Mandatory attendance. I almost skipped. I even typed out an excuse, not feeling well, need to finish reports. But before I could hit send, Claire slid into the seat beside me, like a secret. "You're going?" I frowned. "No, I'm not." "Yes, you are," she replied, opening her umbrella at my desk. "You're wearing mascara. That means you secretly hoped today would matter." I didn't argue, because she wasn't wrong. Half an hour later, we were standing under a dripping awning outside the restaurant. Inside, fake candles flickered and small talk filled the corners. I scanned the room and sighed in relief. No Caleb. Maybe I'd survive this. I slid into my seat at the edge of a long table filled with marketing executives who didn't know my name and definitely didn't care to learn. Claire winked at me from 3 seats away. I played with the edge of the paper napkin, counting minutes. 10 minutes into the meal, he walked in. Late, damp, and unbothered. Caleb. He wasn't wearing a suit today, just a navy sweater, sleeves pushed to the elbows, like someone who didn't have time to pretend. The host pointed him toward a seat. The one next to mine. Of course, because fate likes to stir the pot. He sat down, quietly. No greeting, no forced joke, just his presence, and the proximity that made it impossible to breathe right. I took a sip of water. He leaned slightly toward me. "You almost didn't come." I didn't answer, because yes, he already knew. Appetizers arrived. Small plates, bruschetta and olives and fragments of conversations around us. Someone asked about the next project. Someone else cracked a joke about the economy. I stabbed a tomato like it had personally offended me. Caleb whispered, "You look like that salad said something cruel." I looked at him sideways. Maybe it did. Want to talk about it? No, but I kind of did. Dessert came. Lemon tarts and espresso. And then, silence again, between us. But a different kind this time. More tender. Less guarded. He spoke softly. "I sent you something." I turned. "What?" "In a book." My eyebrows furrowed. "When? Why?" He shrugged. "You said once you didn't believe in love stories that start with accidents." I blinked. That was weeks ago. One elevator ride, one skirt comment, one offhanded remark I thought he'd forget. But he hadn't. "I wrote a note inside," he added. My voice came out quieter than I meant. "What did it say?" He smiled, soft. "I hope someday we call this a beginning." The waiter came by. "Will that be one check or separate?" Before I could answer, Caleb handed him his card. I opened my mouth to protest. He held up a hand. "This isn't a date," he said. "It's just lunch." I paused. "Right?" I didn't answer, because that word didn't fit anymore. Outside, the rain had stopped. The air was thick with that fresh post-rain stillness that makes everything feel cleaner, newer. I turned to him under the overhang. "You know, I almost didn't come." "No, but I'm glad I did." He looked at me, really looked. "I'm always glad when you show up." We didn't hug. We didn't touch. We just stood there, two people in the middle of a pause, with all the weight of the unsaid pressing between them. And for the first time, it didn't feel like pressure. It felt like potential. Chapter 9. The Hand He Didn't Let Go. The fire alarm went off at 3:37 p.m. Not during a dramatic moment, just in the middle of spreadsheets. The kind of moment where people groaned, grabbed their phones, and filed out of the building like bored ants. I stood by the stairwell, waiting, arms crossed. Then I felt him beside me. Caleb. No words, just his presence. And then something different. His hand brushed mine. Not accidentally. I didn't move. And neither did he. We walked in silence down 7 flights of stairs. It was nothing, technically. Just shared space. Shared quiet. But I could feel it. The electricity humming beneath my skin. By the time we reached the sidewalk, his fingers had found mine again. And this time, he held on. Firm. Deliberate. Like something decided. We stood across from the building, watching the crowd of employees mill around, eyes on their phones, pretending not to care. He turned to me, still not letting go. "Want to walk?" I hesitated, then nodded. And we walked. 2 blanks. And 3, still no words. Still his hand in mine. I couldn't tell you where we were going, but I didn't want to stop. At a quiet bench in front of a bookstore, he finally let go, just long enough to sit. Then he reached for my hand again. Like muscle memory, like maybe he'd been waiting for an excuse. "I've been thinking," he said finally. "Dangerous." He smiled faintly. "Probably." I looked down at our hands. "Why now?" I asked. He tilted his head. "Why not now?" "I don't know. Because it's complicated. Because we work together. Because it scares me." His voice softened. "I think we've both been scared for a long time." I didn't answer. I couldn't. So he continued. "You were right. That day in the elevator, whatever this is, isn't just about coffee, or timing, or office lunches." I turned toward him. "Then what is it?" He looked down at my hand, still in his. "I think it's about learning to choose someone, even when everything says not to. I think it's about showing up, even when it's messy." "You think or you know?" "I'm not sure yet," he said, "but I know I don't want to let go." It was my turn to speak, but words failed me. So I leaned back, watched the clouds shift above us, and gently, without looking at him, I said, "I used to think love was loud." He stayed quiet. "I thought it came with fireworks, with grand gestures, with declarations shouted in the rain." A pause. "And then you sat next to me at a lunch I almost skipped. You brought me coffee I didn't ask for. You held my hand in a fire drill." I looked at him now, and suddenly silence feels louder than anything. He squeezed my hand. Not tighter, just more certain. "We don't have to figure it all out today," he said. "But maybe we can start by not running anymore." I stared at our joined hands, at the place where 2 lives quietly met. And I whispered, "Okay." We walked back to the office, slowly. The crowd had thinned. The alarm had stopped. But something in me had started again. When we reached the front door, he let go of my hand. Only for a moment. But I felt it. Like absence. Like promise. Later that night, I found a note on my desk. Typed, but with my name in his handwriting at the top. "You don't have to answer anything yet. But for the record, I meant it. All of it. The lunch, the hand, you." I folded the note carefully, clipped it into the front pocket of my bag. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like something fragile. I felt chosen. Chapter 10. The words she didn't have to say. It started with a post-it note. Yellow, slightly curled at the corner, stuck to her laptop screen on a quiet Monday morning. All it said was, "Conference room, 10 a.m. Just us." No name. But she knew. Of course she knew. Sophie stood outside the door at 9:59. She wasn't nervous. She was suspended. Like someone standing on the edge of a dock, watching water move but not sure when to jump. Inside, Caleb was waiting, jacket off, sleeves rolled, hands resting on the table like they had something to confess. He didn't smile when she walked in. He just breathed deeper. Close the door? She did. I'm not calling this a meeting, he said, standing. Then what is it? He stepped forward. Not rushed, not hesitant either. The risk. Sophie tilted her head. Those are usually discouraged in corporate settings. He smiled. I'm making an exception. A long pause. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. To ask for something I don't deserve, but still want. She sat down, quietly, calmly. But inside, every wall was vibrating. I've been thinking, Caleb said, still standing. You never said it. Sophie blinked. Said what? What this is, what we are. She looked down. I didn't have to, she whispered. You knew. He nodded. I did, but I also wanted to hear it. I know, she said, but I was afraid that naming it would break it. His voice cracked. And I was afraid that not naming it would make it disappear. He finally sat across from her. Close, but not touching. I don't want to be the CEO you dated, he said, or the guy who tore your skirt, or stole your cab, or left you wondering. Then who do you want to be? His eyes held her. I want to be the one who never makes you guess again. She didn't reply right away. She didn't need to, because in the quiet that followed, everything unspoken became clear. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small envelope. I wrote something. Another note? No, he said. A contract. Her brows furrowed. He passed her the envelope. She opened it. Inside, a single sheet of paper. At the top, in bold, Universal Terms of Emotional Partnership, Agreement. Below it, typed neatly, I promise to listen even when I'm tired. I promise to laugh, even when it's inconvenient. I promise to never weaponize silence again. I promise to hold your hand like I mean it, every time. I promise that this isn't just something I'm trying. This is the life I want. With you. At the bottom. Signed Caleb Monroe. Witnessed by that damn elevator. Sophie stared at the paper. In the corners. At the ink. At her name written faintly under co-signer. I didn't sign this, she murmured. You didn't have to, he said, but you've been showing up for it since the beginning. She looked up at him, and something in her chest cracked open. Not painfully, but like a window letting in spring. I thought I'd need to give a speech, she said. You don't. I thought I'd need to explain why I was scared. You don't. I thought I'd need to say I love you first. You don't, he said again, because I already do. And just like that, every unspoken word melted between them. She crossed the space between their chairs and kissed him. Soft, trembling, but certain. No titles, no drama, no noise. Just the sound of two people finally arriving. Later that evening, as they walked out of the building together, he stopped at the curb. She raised an eyebrow. What? This is where it started, remember? She smiled. You stole my cab. I was in a hurry. To mess up my entire life? To find the only person who could fix mine. He opened the door of the cab this time. Let her in first. And before closing it, he leaned down and whispered. You never had to say the words. I already heard them. Every time you stayed. If this story touched you. There are some stories that don't begin the way you expect. Not with a kiss. Not even with a hello. Sometimes they start with a mistake. A ripped skirt. A stolen cab. A coffee someone didn't deserve. And in between those moments, messy, clumsy, imperfect, something real begins. Not the fairy tale kind. The ordinary, but fought for kind. The kind where two people meet in the middle of their chaos and say, even if I mess this up, I want to try with you. Sophie never gave a grand speech. Caleb never got the timing exactly right. But somehow, they both chose each other. And again. Without needing a perfect script, he let go of control. She let go of fear. And what was left was something quiet, warm, lasting. If you've ever been afraid to try again, if you've ever held back your feelings because you didn't want to say the wrong thing, if you've ever loved someone through silence, through glances, through small everyday gestures, then maybe this was your story too. Because love doesn't always shout. Sometimes it holds your hand in a fire drill and never lets go. Sometimes it writes its vows on a fake contract. Sometimes it just shows up. And if this story touched you, if it made you laugh, ache, or feel something you've buried for too long, then the next one goes even deeper. Because the best stories aren't the ones that end with a kiss. They're the ones where both people keep choosing, even after the credits, even when no one's watching. Especially then,